All right. Hello to everyone, and welcome to the National Skillshare series on addressing and preventing gender-based violence at post-secondary institutions in Canada. My name is Karina Gabriel, and I am the Community of Practice Coordinator for the Courage to Act project. We are thrilled to welcome you to our Skillshare session today with the International Student Community of Practice. Before we begin, a quick note on language and accessibility. Attendees can turn on and off captioning in Zoom as needed by clicking closed caption in the controls bar at the bottom of your screen. You can also listen to this session in French by selecting the French language channel using the interpretation menu. Today's session is being recorded and will be available on our website along with the transcript of the session. A graphic recording will also be created from today's presentation by Annalie from Drawing Change. Her role is to listen deeply and translate our ideas into visuals. You can watch Annalie drawing as she follows along with the session by spotlighting her video in your Zoom setting. There will be graphic recordings available for all of our Skillshare sessions, which you can find on the Education tab of our website, and when they are released as part of the Community of Practice tools via the Courage to Act Knowledge Center. Courage to Act is a 2-year national initiative to address and prevent gender-based violence on post-secondary campuses in Canada. It builds on the key recommendations within Possibility Seed's Vital Report, Courage to Act, developing a national framework to address and prevent gender-based violence at post-secondary institutions. Our project is the first national collaborative of its kind to bring together scholars, experts, and advocates from across Canada to end gender-based violence on campus. A key feature of our project is our National Skillshare series. Next slide, please. Part of the National Skillshare series is where our working groups, our communities of practice, and keynote speakers will discuss tools, trends, and strategies that will shape how we address and prevent gender-based violence on campus. Through the Skillshare series, we are so pleased to introduce and offer insight into the development of the tools and resources created by gender-based violence experts from across the country. There will be a chance to sign up for piloting opportunities via the Courage to Act Knowledge Center in fall 2021. Attendees will join a connected network of experts and advocates across Canada who are exploring urgent issues and promising practices. Supported by Caucus, these Skillshare sessions are also a recognized learning opportunity. Attendance at 10 or more live webinars and our National Skillshare series sessions will count towards an online certificate. Our project is made possible through generous support and funding from the Department for Women and Gender Equality, or WAGE, Federal Government of Canada. We begin today's session by acknowledging that this work is taking place on and across the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations. The importance of this acknowledgement is particularly significant given that we are currently in National Indigenous History Month, and in light of the devastating discoveries of mass graves of Indigenous children at the sites of many former residential schools across Canada. We recognize that gender-based violence is just one form of violence caused by colonization to marginalize and dispossess Indigenous peoples from their lands and waters. Our project strives to honor this truth as we move towards decolonizing this work and actualizing justice for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls across the country. Any liberation from gender-based violence cannot take place without addressing the ongoing genocide, impact of settler colonialism, and many forms of violence, historical and contemporary, inflicted upon Indigenous communities in Canada. This is an invitation to take a deep breath. It's been a heavy news cycle with Indigenous children continuing to be found on the sites of former residential schools, as well as the recent terrorist attack fueled by violent anti-Muslim hate and Islamophobia in London, Ontario, in which 4 members of a Muslim family were targeted and killed. We are all mourning this violence. It has no place in a consentful world. We take another deep breath because engaging in GBV work can be challenging. Many of us may have our own experience of survivorship and of supporting those we love and care about who have experienced gender-based violence. A gentle reminder here to be attentive to our well-being as we engage in these difficult discussions. You can visit the self-care section of our Skillshare webpage or visit our Selfcare room by visiting the link just posted in the chat now. You are invited to enter questions into the Q&A box throughout the session, and they will be posed to the International Student CP at the end of the presentation. We will try to engage with as many questions as we can during the time that we have together today. And at the end of this hour, you will find a link to an evaluation form. We'd be very grateful if you could take a few minutes to share your feedback, as it helps us improve. This form is anonymous, and following the session, we will also email you with a copy of our evaluation form and a link to the recording so you can view it again and share with your networks. So I am now so excited to introduce you to our International Students Community of Practice and the 5 speakers who will be presenting with us today: Sudhanan, Cecilia, Aaron, Radhika, and Amna. A little bit about each of these wonderful folks. Sudhanan Sharma is currently the Associate Dean, Community Citizenship, Student Leadership and Engagement at Sheridan College. He's dedicated to improving the lives of students and taking an active role in influencing change on both policy and individual levels. He is the co-chair of Sheridan's task force dedicated to the prevention of sexual assault and sexual violence, and created the award-winning Dare to Care program, which promotes bystander attitudes and challenges students to take action against sexual violence on campus and in their community. Cecilia Liu is currently a Master of Teaching candidate at the University of Toronto and recently completed her undergraduate degree at Western University. During her time at Western, she was actively engaged in various forms of student leadership and was elected to serve a 1-year term as an executive officer at Western University Students' Council. Through her extracurricular involvements, Cecilia discovered her immense passion for racial justice and gender-based violence prevention, and was instrumental in the creation of Western's first anti-racism working group. She takes a creative, artistic, and thoughtful approach to social justice and is committed to approaching this work through an anti-oppressive framework and grounding herself in her empathy for others. Erin Cordich is a registered social worker and the Sexual Violence Response Advisor at Bow Valley College in Calgary, Alberta. In her role, Erin is the primary point of contact for students who have been impacted by sexual violence. She is responsible for the development and implementation of training and programming initiatives for learners, faculty, and staff that focuses on sexual violence response, awareness, and education. Radhika Gupta is an undergraduate student specializing in international development studies and minoring in women and gender studies and psychology at UTSC. Her life philosophy is, "I cannot do all of the good the world needs, but the world needs all the good that I can do." During her work with Courage to Act, she hopes to encourage PSIs to offer more culturally aware, trauma-informed, and survivor-centered resources and services for impacted folks. And Amna Siddiqui is a registered nurse and the former Sexual Violence Prevention and Education Coordinator at Lakehead University's Office of Human Rights and Equity in Thunder Bay. Amna's role included supporting survivors of sexual and gender-based violence, as well as providing education and training to the Lakehead University community on initiatives related to sexual violence prevention and human rights. Currently, she works for a community organization supporting COVID-19 recovery among people experiencing homelessness. And so without further ado, I am so excited to hand it off to our International Student CP.
Wonderful. Thanks, Karina, for starting us off. And hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Erin Cordich. My pronouns are she and her. And I am a member of the International Student Community of Practice and will be moderating today's Skillshare presentation. Our community of practice will be presenting on the FAQ, which stands for Frequently Asked Questions, toolkit that we developed. Today's presentation will break down the process of developing this tool, as well as explore how this tool can be used by post-secondary campuses across Canada. Next slide, please. And our community of practice was composed of a cross-section of roles, including post-secondary students, administrators, faculty, and frontline workers from across Canada. And today, 3 of our wonderful community of practice members, Anand, Radhika, and Cecilia, will be presenting about this tool. I will now pass it off over to Radhika to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin, for the wonderful introduction. Hi, folks. My name is Radhika Gupta. I use the pronouns she, her, and I'd like Thank you all for being here today. Gathered these concerns based on gaps identified in the 2018 chapter experience and continued impact of experience with gender-based violence was to be accessible to the widest number of people possible. Our tool provides sample answers as well as advice on supports and resources, particularly survivors' rights and supports available to those who are impacted by gender-based violence at PSIs. We hope to encourage institutions to utilize this tool as a template to better serve the needs of the international student community. We'd like to clarify that this FAQ is simply a guide and does not intend to offer legal advice. As we went through the Courage to Act report, we identified a few challenges that impact international students who are impacted by gender-based violence. Some of these concerns included concerns around confidentiality, implications on one's immigration, work, or study permit and status. We also noted that there may be confusion around navigating various justice systems, whether that's an institution's internal system or the provincial judicial system. There also seemed to be a lack of awareness in regards to both off and on-campus accommodations and supports, as well as access to culturally sensitive, relevant resources and care that account for intersectional identities and experiences. International students are an integral part of our campus communities, and it's vital that our supports and resources are inclusive and reflective of that. When creating our toolkit, we wanted to take a trauma-informed approach. We recognize that folks who are impacted by gender-based violence may experience high levels of stress or trauma. Our tool addresses these considerations by using language around intersectionality, as well as racism and other forms of oppression, and making sure that we utilize plain language so as to be accessible to a wide audience. We highlighted intersectional mental health resources and information on academic accommodations, briefly discussed different levels to reporting, for example, school versus judicial system, and discussed legal, immigration, and work or study visa concerns. Our community of practice is mindful of the unique stresses that folks impacted by gender-based violence may face. This tool contains information meant to guide institutions in better supporting students who may be at their most vulnerable. This tool was developed, revised, and revised again many times before we produced our final FAQ tool. When our community of practice was formed, we began brainstorming on the type of tool we wanted to create, the concerns we wanted to address, and how to best go about this. After we reviewed the Courage to Act report and other relevant literature, we were able to better identify existing resources and promising practices, as well as gaps in support. We then began developing our tool through a collaborative consultation process with the rest of our CP, and eventually even brought on a project consultant to help formulate our tool. Our tool discusses the University of Central Ontario. This is a fictional university that we use to provide the language of our FAQ. We realized that international students are a part of campus communities across the country, so it was important that our tool was easily accessible and customizable across Canada, while being mindful to not include information that could potentially be out of date or not applicable to certain provinces or territories. And I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to my colleague Sinan now.
Thank you so much, Radhika. My name is Sinan Sharma, and my pronouns are he and him. So just quickly, just wanted to talk about some of the applications of how to use this tool. So as you've heard, the tool was developed as a response to the gaps outlined earlier in regards to resources and support for international students and their needs. Overall, the tool contains helpful links to resources and supports from across the country that are applicable to international student needs. You heard Radhika mention some promising practices, and in our document, we're highlighting one promising practice in relation to Mosaic, which is a group out of British Columbia, which has a set of comprehensive supports and resources for international students in several languages. Through our research, while we were able to find translated resources, gender-based violence resources which are specific to international students are not common across the country. As you will see in the final section, the tool provides sample language and sample answers for common questions and was designed to be applicable to multiple stakeholders across post-secondary campuses. Some of the stakeholders that we're going to review with specific applicability are international students, administrators, and frontline workers. So in this next slide here, we're starting on international students. For students, that's our primary focus for those of us at post-secondary institutions. And this tool provides information and supports for international students in a number of key areas. Those key areas align to the gaps that we had previously mentioned. As English is not the first language of many international students, the tool uses plain language throughout. And this is important for comprehension for our students. For survivors or those who've experienced or been affected by gender-based violence, the tool addresses details in a few areas. Number one is confidentiality. It addresses questions around who will find out? Will my teachers know? Will my family know? It addresses implications on immigration. What will happen to my status? What will happen to my study or work permit if there's a gap in my studies or if my studies are extended? It also focuses on reporting and the criminal justice system and navigating both internally and externally, as there's many questions surrounding both processes. But it also provides details on how to access accommodations and support on campus and in the community, which are both culturally sensitive and relevant. For respondents, the resource contains information related to the reporting process and implications on immigration if there's a criminal charge. It starts to address what are the effects of sanctions or separations from the institution or criminal charges for respondents. Finally, the tool can be used for general education for students. It provides a general education for all student audiences related to consent, student rights, and it also provides definitions in a number of key terms. For administrators, as an administrator, the tool can be used to do an audit on your institution's response, resources, and education. I myself, as you heard in the bio, am an administrator and also a member of our sexual violence task force. And we're going to be using this as an audit to see what and where we can make improvements to our responses, resources, and education. The sample questions may present gaps in current information, or it may present opportunities for institutional growth. Some of the ways that the tools can be used by administrators is to review your programming and identify opportunities for how to tailor resources to be reflective of your community. The tool can also help identify areas for increased awareness, education, or support. The tool can help you examine the supports on campus and ensure they're meeting the diverse intersectional needs of your campus compositions. Finally, the tool can be used to train a variety of post-secondary stakeholders on how to support international students. With respect to policy and procedure, the tool can also be used to inform your sexual violence policy and procedure and can be customized and adapted to create support structures that meet the needs of international students who have been affected or who have experienced gender-based violence. The last area that we're going to highlight is frontline gender-based violence workers. Frontline gender-based violence workers can adapt the tool to make it most relevant to their student communities and ensure the supports are culturally appropriate, trauma-informed, and specific to the available resources in your geographic region or on campus. Throughout this document, we've stressed that survivors have the right to be accommodated, and institutions can use this guide to inform how they support international students. It provides answers for questions and also provides considerations for additional unique support needs for international students. These may help when frontline workers are working with students who are affected to help alleviate fear or confusion. Cultural safety is also an important consideration for our students. And international students represent a diversity of beliefs, cultures, values, and backgrounds. And it is important that resources institutions provide take a holistic approach and respect the dignity and values of the student accessing their supports. This FAQ can serve as a practical tool on teaching frontline staff about the types of unique concerns that international students may face when experiencing gender-based violence. I'd like to now pass this on to my colleague Cecilia to provide some specific applications of how the tool can be used.
Thank you, Sunan. As Sunan said, my name is Cecilia Liu. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm the project consultant for the International Students Community of Practice of the Courage to Act project. So over the next few slides, I will be giving examples of FAQ questions and answers from our tool that are specific to the needs of international students who have been affected by gender-based violence. These examples will demonstrate the tool's trauma-informed approach and the considerations that we took of international students as a whole person, taking into account the different challenges they may face through the different intersections of their identities. So now, as you can see on the screen here, this first example falls under the category question, how might accommodations affect my work and study permits? This question takes into consideration the impact that the stress of navigating work and study permits can have on international students. Underneath, there's the more specific question of, will my work permit be affected if I can no longer work or have to take time off of school? In this question, right below, there is also a box that can guide institutions in writing their own answers to this question. So for example, we included, for this answer, you can insert information about work permits specific to your school's policies and link to their International Student Center or relevant student service. This might include information about how to reach an immigration advisor at your school. Below, we provide a sample FAQ answer that uses the previously mentioned fictional university, the University of Central Ontario, to guide the development of an institution-specific answer. So a sample FAQ answer is, talk to one of UCO, University of Central Ontario's, licensed immigration specialists to see how your work or study permit might be impacted. When you're speaking with our immigration specialists, you don't need to share all the details of the incident or gender-based or sexual violence. If you think you might need to speak to an immigration specialist, you can also go through our staff at the Center for Sexual Violence Education and Outreach. The center's staff can help you connect with a UCO immigration specialist so you don't have to talk about the incident many times. It then goes on to describe the conditions under which students are able to work in accordance with their study permit. So as mentioned previously, in this sample FAQ answer, we take a trauma-informed approach in answering the question and also use plain language and specifics to guide international students. This next sample FAQ question and answer illustrates a trauma-informed approach to supporting international students who have been affected by gender-based violence, as it again takes into consideration one of the many stressors that they may face if they choose to report an incident. This sample addresses the question, if I report to the school, who will know? Confidentiality, as we know, is a major factor in whether a student chooses to report an incident of gender-based violence. In this question, we are taking a trauma-informed approach by supporting the international student as a whole person, thinking of their different communities at school and in their home country. So some sample questions that we ask under if I report to the school, who will know is, will it show up on my transcript? Will my family know? Will my peers or classmates know? Will my instructors or teaching assistants know? Will anyone from my home country know? And will the IRCC know? These are all different communities that an international student may be taking into consideration when they are making a decision of whether or not to report. I'll read some of the sample answers. So for the first one, for the second one, will my family know? If you choose to report, It will be kept confidential as per the circumstances above, and your family will not be notified by your school. Similarly, will anyone from my home country know? If you choose to report, it will be kept confidential as per the circumstances above. Your school will not be in contact with anyone from your home country, including your home country's government. This last example once again focuses on the specifics related to our audience of international students by recognizing that some international students may be unfamiliar with Canada's justice system and our other reporting systems. If I report to the police or go through the Canadian justice system, will my home country know? What does Canada's justice system look like? As previously mentioned, when supporting international students who have been affected by gender-based violence, it is important to use plain language resources and explain the different specificities of different reporting procedures and supports to make their options fully clear before they make a decision about reporting or choosing to go through a justice system. The answer to the last question here, you do not need to go through the justice or legal system to receive support. Canada has a democratic legal process that is founded on the presumption of innocence, meaning everyone is innocent until proven guilty. We then provide a few different resources and links to find out more about Canada's justice system. All right, so those are 3 different examples from our FAQ resource that will be released in the near future. And to finish off, our last slide of this presentation includes further development and future considerations for the tool, but also in supporting international students across the post-secondary sector as a whole. So in the development of this tool and presentation, the community of practice realized the importance of recognizing this tool as a living document, one that can be adapted across institutions to support international students in their specific experiences, and also adapt and grow as we continue to have conversations with international students about their needs. So with that said, how can we take this tool further? As mentioned throughout this presentation, language support is an important factor to take into consideration when supporting and providing resources for international students who have been affected by gender-based violence. To further develop this tool, it should be translated in the most commonly used languages by international students across the country or at specific institutions. Secondly, our community of practice did not have members who are legal experts in the field of immigration law. Thus, another consideration in the further development of this tool is to have legal experts in the field provide insight on the impact that gender-based violence can have on international students from an immigration standpoint for both complainants and respondents. For example, another FAQ question could be, if I have received a sanction by my school, will I lose my work or study permit? Of course, as we continue to support international students who have been affected by gender-based violence, we must continuously meaningfully consult with them and include them in the development of any future resources. Our community of practice had international students, which was important in creating a tool that reflected the voice and needs of international students. Recognizing this means that we must continue to center the voices of international students in supporting them in the future. Our community of practice, as Erin previously mentioned, includes and considers a variety of perspectives and lived experiences of administrators, students, frontline workers, and more. This toolkit was designed and presented through these lenses, but we need to continue to include the voices of a variety of international students with different lived experiences. Lastly, as we are doing now, a future consideration for the tool is to share and collaborate on the adapted tool at institutions across the country to share best practices, ideas, and actions in order to best support our international students. And with that, that finishes off the tool presentation portion. And I would like to thank you all for listening to myself and my colleagues in presenting. And I will now pass it off to Karina.
Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you so much to the panel for presenting about the tool. I have had the honor of working with the community of practice throughout the last year and a half as the tool's been developed, and so excited that we have the opportunity to share high level everything about the tool with you all today. So I'm going to invite all the panelists back to put on their cameras and join, including Erin, for the Q&A portion. Attendees, if you have any questions at all for our presenters, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A box or in the chat so that the panelists can answer those burning questions you have about their fantastic frequently asked questions tool. Before we get to questions in the chat, I do have a couple questions for the panelists if they're open to responding to them. Either each of you can respond. Some questions are specific to some of the panelists. So the first question that I will ask is to everyone, from the perspective of an administrator, what do you think might be the most valuable piece for another administrator to take away?
Assuming that's myself, as I think I'm the only administrator on our group, I think the most valuable thing is that we respect two things. And one, that any approach that you take needs to be student-centered, meaning we need to not only involve students in the process of determining what supports are best for them, but we have to ensure that there's mechanisms along the way to ensure that students are involved. And as their needs change, so does your programs or your supports. I'd also say that it's very important that while we're saying international students, it's important to know that all international students are very different. And that as an administrator, as we look to use the tool to audit our programs or resources, knowing that there's nuanced difference based on where international students come from, and respecting that intersectional identity as you look to create anything so that it has mass application, which is reflective to all of your students.
Would anyone else like to build on that? Awesome. Okay. The next question we have for you folks is, and this is for the students on the panel, what has working on this tool as a student meant for you?
I can start off if that's okay. So yeah, like I'd said before, I'm an undergraduate student at UTSC. It's been just really magical, honestly. It feels like gender-based violence is something that's, very important to me. It's a cause I think that's been on my radar pretty much for like the entirety of my university career. And it's, impacted people I know. And so being able to work on this tool and hopefully take, even a small step towards making change in the realm of gender-based violence, and if this helps reduce harm or make things easier and less scary and confusing for someone, I just think that's such a powerful thing. So it's been really special for me to be able to be part of the group working on this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Radhika. And to sort of build off what you said, I'm a current grad student at U of T as well. And I just recently finished off my undergrad at Western, where I was an executive at the Students' Union. So I think with my experiences already working with many different administrators on sort of similar working groups of this sort, this experience has been really, really meaningful to me, in that we were able to create an actionable tool and resource for students to use. And it was a very level and even playing field, which was really, really incredible to be able to work with frontline workers, administrators, and then also other students, and to all just have conversation and consensus around, what we were feeling and what we felt the tool needed, when considering the literature and our own experiences, and then putting together this tool that will be soon released. So taking into consideration my previous experiences as a student organizer, I really, really appreciated the opportunity to contribute my thoughts and experiences as a project consultant on this tool.
Thank you. And I think that's so powerful to the students who respond to this question, Radhika and Cecilia, to have students who are working on this, is incredibly important because that's a lens and a perspective that matters so much when the community of practice is about international students and their experiences. So thank you so much for sharing. Another question we have for the panel is, how did you determine what questions should be included in the FAQ resource?
I can go ahead and answer this if other folks want to jump in afterwards. When I came into the project, as previously mentioned, we are a community of practice with a variety of different lived experiences from across the country. So administrators, frontline workers, students, and all of us had worked with or are international students ourselves. So with all those perspectives in mind, and then with our own expertise as well, we were able to come up with many, many different questions, or really just considerations. They kind of started out as points that we wanted to include or answers to questions that we had from our own experiences. And we had a long, long list, and eventually, we were able to filter through them and sort of synthesize the different questions that we had come up with based on our experiences, and also based on a scan of the already available literature, some other, FAQs that exist, maybe not for international students per se, but just FAQs that already exist across the sector.
Yeah, I just pick up on that a little bit, and Cecilia mentioned it. For us, it's really practice-based evidence. So regardless what role we're in, each of us have interacted with international students or students in general on our various PSI campuses or within the community. So making sure that we brought those experiences to the table, but then drilled it down to which ones were had specific applicability to the audience that we were serving.
And I can add just a little bit more on that as well. I think as Sunand and Cecilia mentioned, that it came from a lot of our lived and practiced experience as well. And I think what really, at least for myself through this process, what really stood out is how important it is to include voices across our campuses or between campuses and work together to explore, okay, what are the needs, what are the barriers that we're commonly hearing, and how can we work together as whether it be a campus community or campus communities across Canada to best support international students, whether it be for support to exploring helping them explore reporting options, and to make sure that they feel safe on campus and are able to feel connected and engaged through the process.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from panelists on that piece? Okay, if not, oh, Amna, I see your camera's on. Did you want to add something?
Sure, I just wanted to add, I think Erin, Sunand, Cecilia all summed up, the comprehensive process that went into this, but also that, there's so many questions that we could have added in this toolkit as well. So really just encouraging any institution who's going to, uptake the tool to, continue to do that self-reflection and make sure that, you incorporate the diverse voices and their perspectives into, whatever iteration of the toolkit that you decide to implement on your campus.
Now, building on your point, you mentioned how there's a lot of questions that could have been included in this tool. One of the things that I know this team has really emphasized in the creation of this tool is that this is a living document. It's something that will continue to be expanded and added on. So I'm wondering if anybody on the team can expand on why that's the case.
I think my answer would be twofold, in that first and foremost, the way that the tool is structured, as I showed in some of the examples earlier, is that it's supposed to be adapted to specific institutions. Oh, apologies. Give me 1 second, actually. They're doing fire alarm testing in my building, so if somebody else would like to pick up from where I am, left off.
Work from home.
I think where I could just jump in there is that why it's a living document is the fact that we know that Canada is such a large country, and the specific types of international students or the specific institutions all differ in size and type. And to make sure that this has application to your specific institution, it has to be a living document to allow you to tailor to your specific region or to your specific supports. That is one of the reasons why it's a living document. Cecilia, your fire alarm gone or no?
I think we're good now.
Okay, good.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think Sunan summed up my first point really perfectly. Thank you for helping out there. And the second thing that I was going to say is that, you know, this work will always be ongoing. Sorry, I think it'll be okay. This work will always be ongoing, right? So we will always have students to support. And I think that is another aspect of why this is a living document, in that this document can continuously not only be adapted to specific institutions, but the document can be, you know, improved on, the document can be translated. And I think language is a really important piece that we had sort of emphasized throughout the presentation, in that we wrote the document in plain language so that it would be an easy read, or hopefully readable for folks maybe who are not English speakers as their first language. But I also think that this document would be incredibly useful should it be translated into the most commonly used languages at specific institutions by international students, or the most common languages of their home countries.
I add just a bit more on that as well. And I think another intention with the living document is to encourage the campuses and institutions that take it up to explore, okay, what are additional gaps? What are we hearing? And include those, consult with the international students on their campus or other stakeholders to bring in that voice and add to the document, or explore other tools that they could bring in to help support those students. And so to continually having that dialogue and collectively on the campus to help whether it be improve the applicability of the tool or include additional supports and resources for international students is the hope for this document, as well as again, as was mentioned in the presentation, consult with other post-secondaries as well who may have taken up this this tool and see what's gone well for them and using it, what hasn't, how they've changed it and taken it up. I think it's, yeah, the hope is that it brings folks together in that dialogue to continue this work to support international students.
I'd add one more to this, that it's a living document because of the future development that Cecilia mentioned in her final slide. So none of us are certified immigration specialists, and we know that is the bulk, it is a major area of questions for individuals who are respondents and complainants in relation to gender-based violence. So we were conscious of that, and we're conscious that there's designated individuals who are certified to give that type of advice. So we were hoping that it's iterative in that sense, that you can build off of this as a starting point and maybe incorporate some of those future areas of how to move the tool forward.
Thank you to all of the panelists. Everything that you said there is so incredibly important to explain where the tool is going next, why it is fluid, why this work needs to be ongoing. Another question we have for each of you is, do you have any recommended resources to read or review if we want to learn more about how GVV impacts international students?
Go ahead, Sunand. I saw you unmuted there.
No, please go ahead.
So there are definitely some resources referenced in the FAQ itself. And I believe there is another resource at the end which highlights some promising practices from Mosaic, which is an organization in BC that is doing a lot of work on this as well.
We're playing the mute game. Sunand, did you want to add to that?
No, basically it's exactly what Amna said, is that we found scholarly research in various areas and sample FAQ tools around the country But specific to this, not necessarily. So the references in the tool, in the reference list, as Amna has said, is a great starting point. But again, I'm reiterating what she said. My only point was going to be that mosaic, which has taken this to a new level with respect to the set of comprehensive resources from safety planning, disclosure, so on and so forth, specific to international students.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing from the panelists is that there is certainly limited resources around this and that more research certainly needs to be done. I know quite a bit of the existing research that's been done is happening and coming out of the United States. So anything that's specific to Canada, more research needs to be done there. Which speaks though to how incredibly important this tool is and all the research that has been compiled in it within a Canadian context. Another question I have for the panelists is what kind of policy changes might need to happen to better support international students impacted by GBV?
So I'll just jump in for one. So when we speak about, I'll speak specifically for Ontario and our legislative obligation to ensure that those affected or who have experienced sexual violence are accommodated. But sometimes when those accommodations have implications to program, length of program, continuation of program, and how that starts to rub up against study permit or work permit details. So I do think the policy implications, while the expression of having to accommodate is there, the nuanced procedural pieces of how it affects students' immigration status is something that clearly needs to be articulated or linked in both policy and procedure. That's one.
I guess another piece building off a bit of what Sanand mentioned is also around education and awareness for folks who are, whether it be implementing the policy or providing education and awareness to staff and faculty who might be implementing or providing those accommodations to just know about the, again, some of the unique barriers and diversity of the international student experience when it comes to being impacted by gender-based violence, so that there is that awareness of that layer, whether it be about study permits and accommodation and whatnot. So partly, again, brings back to that across campus dialogue in that, and it can certainly be something that, whether it be awareness of the policies or awareness of those pieces in the policy that maybe could be, that are in and of itself so broad, and just that knowing about those different intersections and whatnot through that education, awareness, and dialogue.
Fantastic. Oh, Sunand, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I'm just going to add one more, that I also think that sometimes if we build it, they may not come. Meaning that sometimes we say, just go to counseling office. But we know that many of our international students need support in developing help-seeking behavior. So I think what this also does is ensure that we have culturally sensitive healing and support resources, so that we're not trying to suggest that the Canadian way of healing or support is reflective for all of our students. And how do we incorporate other cultural perspectives to healing or support that isn't a clinical counselor, no disrespect to our counseling colleagues on the call, but which isn't there, because we know that many of our international students aren't going there for support. So what else can we do, looking at community, religious organizations, student groups, cultural groups, that also form community and healing outside of our campuses?
Fantastic. And I want to also, that was kind of like the last formal question we have. We have one other question, and I'll get to that in a moment, but I want to give panelists an opportunity with, if there was anything that you wanted to say, or after the question, you were like, I should have mentioned that. Just want to give a last moment for you folks to unmute if there's anything else you would like to add. It sounds like the responses to the questions everyone feels good with. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, our panelists. I'm going to call on our project manager, Anus, to join us to answer a question that was answered in the Q&A, which is from an attendee asking, thank you so much for the presentation. Where can we access this tool?
Hi, Karina. Thank you for the question. That's a great question. We'll have a number of tools ready for release in fall 2021 via the Courage to Act Knowledge Center. So as mentioned, we have a whole suite of tools and resources and toolkits addressing lots of different aspects of gender-based violence and how to address and prevent it on campuses. And there will be a number available for immediate release, likely the International Students FAQ tool as well, whereas the other tools will be released in a staggered way after we've had an opportunity to really pilot them at other institutions, and further refine the tools before we put them out there. And so again, more information about these tools as well as opportunities to pilot will be made available in fall 2021.
Thank you so much, Anus. And I don't see any other questions in our Q&A or our chat. So at this time, I'm going to close the Q&A. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and our presenters, and we'll wrap up the Skillshare. So a big thank you, as always, to all of the members of our International Student Community of Practice for sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us today. I'm so excited for this tool to be released as part of the Courage to Act project, and thank you to Anus for outlining what that release process looks like. We are so deeply appreciative of the discussion today. As you can see, Annalie from Drawing Change has been creating a beautiful illustration to represent the conversation we've just had. That final graphic, along with the video recording and transcript of this panel, will be available on our website in the coming days. If you are interested in learning more about this tool or in learning more about the opportunity to pilot some of these tools at your post-secondary institution, please continue to follow along the Courage to Act project, and you can sign up for piloting opportunities via the Courage to Act Knowledge Center in fall 2021. And don't forget that registration is still open to sign up for all of the remaining sessions that are part of our National Skillshare series, running through to August 18th, 2021. This Skillshare series will highlight the work being done across Canada to address gender-based violence on our campuses. It will showcase the 15 tools and toolkits being developed by our 150 plus project partners, including our wonderful communities of practice, such as our International Student Community of Practice. You can sign up on the Courage to Act website. I also want to thank each and every one of you, our attendees, for joining us today and for sharing with us. We appreciate and take inspiration from your commitment to addressing and preventing gender-based violence on your campus. We're lucky to be able to work alongside each and every one of you. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today, and a kind reminder to please complete the evaluation forms. Take care, everyone.